Hello everyone, and thanks for coming and joining us at this talk. So today's talk is based on the collaborative UK-Japan research project that I lead at the University of Oxford. It's quite a large team, as you can see, and I'm very lucky to have here my core collaborator, Dr. Lulu as well, and I'm Ekaterina Hertog. So the project focuses on the future of unpaid work. I think most of us have come across these kind of messages in the media where they're all focused on the future of work and tend to be fairly alarmist, talking about how robots might take over jobs. And actually, two colleagues of ours at the University of Oxford a couple of years ago made the prediction that as many as 47% of jobs could be gone and taken over by technology in the next, I mean, they say in the near future, but I think once they said it's about 20 years what they're thinking about. So there's a lot of focus among policymakers, among business academics, even general public media, and so on. However, if our thinking started is, if robots are going to steal our jobs, could they at least maybe also take out our trash? Because there's some jobs that I'd happily give away, especially the ones that are not paid for. Unpaid work takes surprisingly a lot of time in our daily lives. This bar chart is based on the standard time use surveys that measure how people spend their days. And as we can see, I just made a very basic comparison of paid work, blue, and unpaid work, which includes housework, childcare, adult care, and so on, activities like that are actually can be quite exhausting, and no one pays us for that. So as we can see, the length of time for women, on average, they actually spend more time on unpaid work if we average across the whole population. These are all adults over 20, so it would include retired people, of course, as well. And unpaid work is spent very unevenly. It's also essential, which is why I put that little poster showing that actually paid work activities could not continue. Our lives would struggle to continue with our lives if no meals were cooked, no houses were cleaned, and so on. So unpaid work, I hope I convinced you, is worth studying. Some of us, when we think about automation of domestic work, automation of households, maybe, or at least this was me before starting this project, would be imagining something quite futuristic, like this Japanese pepper robot being kind of a play companion, meeting a little girl. But actually, again, without much fuss, a lot of domestic automation looks more like this. And vacuum cleaner robots and floor cleaning robots are actually the most widely sold and produced computational robot in the world. The figures are very high and they're rising rapidly. So without much fuss, some domestic automation and digitalization is already happening. Japan is a very interesting case because traditionally, this is a highly developed, very technologically friendly society. It's also a society that in recent years, especially with the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, they were very friendly to domestic automation. They are basically very much hoping, or that was the vision of the Abe Prime Minister, that there will be robots that will be on stream as early as in 2025, and they'll be able to help with a lot of domestic work and actually help with solving the domestic inequality that we saw in the previous slide, where women do 2.5 times as much of unpaid work, while men work considerably more than women. So in Japan, in the past decade or so, they produced quite detailed visions of how a Japanese household might look like in the near future. And this is one, they are all based, or the ones I've seen, the main ones, are based on the innovation, so-called Innovation 25. This is a policy document produced by Shinzo Abe in early 2000s, saying that in 2025, this is how a Japanese household will look like. Unfortunately, the images in that document were so tiny, you wouldn't see them. So I had to go for this one, which is very similar. This is produced by the NEC Corporation, which is one of the biggest digitalization and electronics corporation in Japan. Their headquarters is in Tokyo. It's now a global multinational giant. So I think this is from 2018, and this is the image of 2030. And I think the two main messages we could take away from this. First of all, this is a typical Japanese family in 2030. There's a lot of automation in their household. I made a couple of screenshots. It's actually a nice little funny movie, but to give some examples, the mom and the child are waking up, and immediately their smart bed produces all kinds of vitals for them to check. Are they healthy? How are they feeling? Did they sleep well? And the dad, who is away working is calling from the smart wall, and they can discuss, have a little chat before breakfast, and he communicates with their life. Later on, the mom is able to drop the kid off. This is a self-driving automated bus. So the kid is driving away, and she is able to save a bit of time, and in that way, balance her work and childcare responsibilities. So 2 messages. One, loads of automation. They're making use of all kinds of interesting gadgets in 2030. Second message, which I thought was really interesting and is gelling further on with the talk that Lulu will continue with our findings, is that it's all about women. On the one hand, it's a highly techy environment, but it preserves beautifully traditional gender roles. The dad in the whole sort of 5-minute movie, he calls in on Skype, and that's the extent of his childcare efforts. And we even see in the messages, although the future gently support her realizing this wish. So she wishes to both work and actually have a child, and this technology will be there to support her. The idea that the dad might take over and perhaps drop the child off at a self-driving bus somehow doesn't cross anyone's mind, at least not in this iteration. Neither in the Innovation 25 documents, it's very similar. They emancipated working women is able to maintain her work life by directing a number of robots in the household. So in addition to her other responsibilities, she's now a robot manager. The family greatly benefits from her efforts. So I think with this, I wanted to highlight that this whole technology discourses and the subjects, they could be quite country-specific, and they're informed by the contexts in which they're happening. And this is the start of our project. In our project, we wanted to see what the experts say, or how we expect domestic automation. These are politicians and policy documents that they're kind of producing these grand visions. But what actually people working with robots and designing these robots, what do they say? We carried out an expert questionnaire in the UK and in Japan, and we have some interesting findings, and Lulu will talk to you about them.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Katja has made a very nice introduction telling us why looking at unpaid work is also very important. And in this study, our project is called Domestic AI, and Katja and I were working on the project, and we have some exciting findings to share with you today. So just to start with, I think maybe worth highlighting and summarizing what Katja just said is that we have 2 very important contributions. One is the contribution to talk about unpaid work, because there's a lot of study done talking about paid work, but not so much unpaid work. And the second contribution is to highlight the contextuality. So what I mean here is to highlight the contextuality of people making the predictions. Because, so just to give you a little bit of background, so this sort of research making predictions about the future is often done by surveying experts. So experts working in the field of technology, and we survey them to ask about their opinion, what do they think, what can be automated in the future, and we pull together those answers from the experts and we average them, and this is how we get a number such as Katja mentioned, this 47% of all jobs being at risk in the next 10 years or so. So what we do is we not only contact the experts and we ask them for their estimations, but we also collect information about the experts. So we want to know where are the experts from. So what we did in our study is that we asked experts in the UK and in Japan because we want to do a counter comparison between UK and Japan. And also we are very much interested in whether men and women do different predictions. Because as Katja has mentioned, women are probably more involved in domestic work, and maybe that will also influence and shape their predictions about the future. So, because we have a very short amount of time, I will directly show you some results. So this is basically what I was talking about. We interviewed or surveyed 65 experts in total, about 30 in Japan, about 30 in the UK. And the gender balance is also about 50-50, although we do have a little bit more men than women, just because there are more men working in technology area. And this is how the answer distribution looks like. So what the numbers mean is 26%, for example, in this case, is on average, Japanese female experts predict that 26% of all domestic work can be automated in the next 5 years. So that's what the number means. And this 22% is a prediction of Japan male expert. And here we can see the same for the UK. So in the first impression, we can already see that there are counter differences. So we can see that in Japan, on average, the experts predict a lower degree of automation, and in the UK, it's a slightly higher degree of automation. And to check whether this difference is actually meaningful, we conducted research. So we use statistical models, basically, to check whether the difference is statistically meaningful. And yes, it is. And also, we can then look at the gender difference. For example, in Japan, we have the female expert predicting a higher degree of automation than men. And in UK, this is the other way around. So that basically confirms our assumption that it's the background of the expert really shapes their view and their vision, how they predict the future. And then in the next slide, I also want to wrap up with this slide. So this slide shows all the experts' answers together. So this is the average of all the 65 experts' answers. And what we have done here is to show the predictions for tasks. And we looked at, so we use, there's an existing data set called time use data, and we use this data set to categorize different domestic tasks. And we categorize into 17 different categories, ranging from, as you can see, from cooking, dishwashing, cleaning, and so on, to teaching a child, interacting with a child, escorting a child, care for an adult. And the bars, again, they indicate the percentage of automation the experts have predicted for the next 5 years. And it's quite interesting to compare between tasks. And one way how social science researchers categorize tasks is to categorize them into household or housework tasks and care work. And with housework, we mean things like cooking, dishwashing, cleaning, so basically the tasks that you can see on the top. And then the care tasks are what we can see here. So everything below physical childcare to care for an adult. So those kind of tasks, they involve a bit more complexity. They involve emotional labor, emotional intelligence. And this is pretty much reflected in what we can see here in the expert's prediction. So in general, for the care task, the predicted automation is lower than for the housework task, and which kind of makes sense. And this is also matching to what our colleagues Frey and Osborne have predicted when they were looking at the labor market. They also found evidence that work that require more emotional intelligence are more difficult to automate. So that's about it. So this is our results. We have a paper very soon coming out, so do check that out. And for tonight, I would like to invite you to participate in our quiz. So in our quiz, you can answer the same questions that we have asked the experts. You can take, we have a little flyer here. You can scan the QR code, and you can select the task that you want to predict the answers. And after each task, you can see what did the expert predict. And for this quiz, we only use the Japanese expert's answer because this is now, tonight is all about the future or Japan. And in the end, you'll see the same figure there, and you can study that, download that, print it out. It's quite a fun quiz, and it's also informative. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I think we can take some questions.
Yeah. We'd love questions.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi. I remember many, many years ago reading, and I'm probably not going to remember it correctly, but by John Kenneth Galbraith, the economist, I suppose it was, in his critique of capitalism, I can't remember the exact words, and he basically said that many machines ultimately were produced for women in the household, as a result of which the women actually ended up doing more with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't remember how exactly the
Yeah.
argument was framed, but it was something, this is what capitalism is doing, or this, it's producing stuff that ends up.
Right.
And he actually said, they're using all these wonderful gadgets, and we're going back 40 years now, but new style gadgets. So I don't know if this was.
That's a great comment. So there is a book probably using that idea. It's called More Work for Mother. The book is published in 1980s, and sounds like about the times. This is the book we were referring to. It's quite an interesting sort of history of technology in the domestic sphere, and how, depending on what's automated and how it's automated, it can create more work. And sort of one of the examples there was when certain tasks like clothes. So people used to spin clothes, now they could buy them, but that produces another task. You had to plan, go shopping, get the clothes, bring them back, keep an eye on. I mean, there's different types of labor produced. There's been quite a lot of debate among sociologists arguing whether electrification, industrialization led to time saving for women and men in the domestic sphere or not. I think eventually the consensus was that still women do have more time these days, and that is linked to their greater participation in the labor market, for example. But it's definitely true that automation does not necessarily straightforwardly leads to time saving, and also it's an interesting conversation to have with the automation work. So at the moment, we're saying what the experts said, it's like technologically possible, but are people going to accept these technologies, and whether once they accept them, what they're going to do? Are they going to invest more time in something else at home? Like, again, historically, introduction of washing machines also led to higher hygiene standards, which meant that people were washing a lot more. So it wasn't suddenly that they were still washing the same amounts, just using a washing machine, and the time was purely saved. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a long-winded answer. Yes, what?
I saw the highest area of technology was grocery shopping. Can you elaborate? What does that mean? Is that online shopping, or just the way that things are being delivered? What does that mean in terms of AI?
So in the survey, we don't exactly ask the experts to give an answer as in text. So unfortunately, we can't to go into detail what they mean with that, but we do specify in the questionnaire that they need to consider what is not automated yet. So discounting for what we already have, such as online shopping and so on. So it's really on top of what we already have. And so we did interview experts, though, as preparation for the survey. So just to get some more insight, to have more qualitative data, because this is kind of purely quantitative. And there, for example, talk about drones that can further reduce the time that we're already spending on shopping. And also, I guess this is coming up, I guess maybe many of us are already using online shopping such as Ocado, and they have really good algorithm already, so maybe they can take over also some of the thinking work. We don't need to plan so much anymore. They know what you want to have. So there's still quite a lot of potential, but that is a very good question. So we are also very eager to understand what is exactly meant by what can be automated.
I mean, I wanted to add, it's quite a scary thought, but I think Amazon patented predictive shopping. It's actually quite a few years back, and what they mean by that is whenever we shop on Amazon, it then suggests various things. At the moment, it's kind of crap, because you buy a sofa and it thinks you want to buy more sofas, which is a very weird idea. But once that becomes more accurate, which is possible with the potentially possible, some of the scholars working on that are musing that they will start sending us things. The model will be that things will arrive, and as long as they're sort of 70% accurate, it will be our job to return stuff, and then we're not charged for it. So that puts the shopping on its head, and yeah, that's...
Thank you. Have you looked equally at automation in the workplace, in the paid work? Because that, you think of BMW factory, if you've done a tour of that or something, we think of automation in the workplace is something that's going to change enormously too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work. This project doesn't doesn't do that. So our focus is on domestic work, partially because there are a couple of, quite a few studies. So the first one came out in 2013 as a working paper, and since then was criticized, debated, elaborated, and the different predictions produced with different models about how much of paid work occupations, I think ranging from this 47% of all occupations and jobs will be replaced by robots, and going down, I think the more conservative ones come up with a 9% prediction, which is still kind of high. But we do not, we read that, but we do not analyze that.
And not related to that question, but just to add to the 47%, we predict 38% for unpaid work. It's a little bit lower, but still significant.
But I'd probably welcome that a bit more.
Yeah.
Why do you think there was such a big difference, particularly between the automation predicted by British and Japanese male experts?
So between Japanese male and female, or between countries?
Male and British male.
Right. So we have some hypotheses. In general, we know that male or men are more optimistic about making predictions. Men make higher predictions than women in general. So this is kind of, we know that from data. However, domestic work is kind of specific, and your exposure to domestic work, your experience to domestic work, also your pressure to do domestic work is different between men and women, and it's also different between countries. So in Japan, we know that there's quite large gender inequality in terms of labor division. So domestic work tends to be mainly done by women and paid labor market work by men. So there's a lot of pressure, but also a lot of maybe knowledge about domestic work. So maybe female experts have more insight or different insight than male. So due to that, maybe we can hypothesize that due to their standpoint, that leads to their different predictions, which is more pronounced in Japan than in the UK.
I also wanted to add, we use one of the quotes. So after we got the first predictions from the experts, we approached some of them who gave particularly unusual, very high or very low estimates of what's going to happen, were extremely optimistic or very pessimistic, and asked them to explain their predictions. And we had a couple of nice quotes, and particularly in Japan, there was a nice contrast where they were both talking about some kind of care task, and a female expert gave a much higher prediction of automation than a male expert. They both justified it in the same way, saying this is going to be really expensive. But the man said, well, too expensive, no one's going to want it. Whereas the female expert said, very expensive, but I'd really like it. And we also have repeated quotes from the experts that although we asked them to consider only the technological feasibility, because we have a separate project that is going to deal with people's willingness, the demand side of it, they said it's quite difficult, that they actually wrote to us in notes saying it's quite difficult to separate, that there is still a marketing consideration. So that might be some of the reason why Japanese men are exceptionally unusual. As we use as a baseline, there's a big Eurobarometer survey that generally asks people how they feel about automation and technology, not specifically in the domestic sphere, and across European countries, we consistently see that men tend to be more optimistic than women.
Could it be cultural and expectations?
Yes, that's exactly.
Expectations in Japan expect some work to be done by hand by females, probably. So therefore, their estimation is slightly lower.
That is also a very nice, good comment. And when we were digging through historical documents, one of the things we discovered that the domestic automation we already have, and what our experts were asked to disregard already, like dishwashers and tumble dryers, that was already saving our efforts. In Japan, specifically dishwashers and tumble dryers have rather low take-up rate. So it's already more women washing dishes by hand. I think it's about 20% of households have dishwashers in Japan. In the UK, it's 56%. In the US, it's 75%. So they have an even higher take-up rate. Tumble dryers, In Japan, there's no statistics, they're so unusual, but that means when we look at time use data, that laundry time is a lot longer in Japan compared to the UK because it's just faster. Not everyone has a tumble dryer, but if one has, it's a labor-saving device, even though maybe clothes destroying slightly.
Is that maybe because they have a culture in Japan of using like collective laundry still rather than stuff in their home?
I think the laundrettes is not so much anymore. Maybe I mean, I lived in Japan for 3 years. So I would look at that. I haven't come across it too much, but actually it's a thought.
Okay, thank you so much for your talk. I think we could honestly go on all night, to be honest.
Thank you. Thank you.